Okay, so to introduce you briefly, I'm assuming you don't need an introduction of the city in particular, but of course you were a former Minister of Justice, and you've been elected in 2015, and you've been Mayor of Vilnius ever since. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what justice has to do with city making, first of all?
First of all, welcome again, everyone. Maybe if it's okay, if you'd like to ask to raise your hands, those who are not from Vilnius, just to understand. Okay, quite a number. Okay, just to orientate a little bit, what shall I tell or not? First of all, what both Minister of Justice and Member of Parliament and the Mayor is politics. It's politics, so it has one umbrella. Why I'm in politics? Because I'm a little bit afraid, I was a little bit afraid of other people taking care of my life. So the only choice was to go myself into politics and to try making it a little bit smarter. So in justice, again, in the area of justice, I had some strange agenda. My main agenda was related to something what you were telling about as well. I think my main achievement over there was the one which was not so much noticed by general public, but to me it's the most important, is changing the attitude or the patterns how all the business controlling institutions do operate in practice. When I became Minister of Justice and I declared this agenda, and when I told that, emotionally my goal would be the situation when somebody from controlling institution like Food and Safety Inspection or from Tax Inspection, Labor Inspection or from somewhere is calling a businessman, and businessman doesn't afraid to hear that. When business people would expect help instead of attack from controlling institutions, so people were actually openly laughing at me. They're saying, no, that's impossible. The goal of those institutions is to actually to find something wrong and to press business and to do this. Actually, I was able to change this. In 2.5 years, the situation was completely different because 2/3 of business leaders were telling that, yes, now we feel that now those institutions do behave quite differently. And the idea was that we all have the same goal. If you run a restaurant, as a restaurant owner, you don't want your clients to get poisoned. As a client, you don't want to get poisoned. And as an institution, you also work to help the restaurant not to poison its clients. So in general, the goal is the same. So if you have disagreements, it's not normal. Something is wrong if you are arguing between each other. If you are arguing with your waiter, something is wrong. If the restaurant is arguing with Food and Safety Inspection, something is wrong. We don't know what, but something is wrong. So we worked in order to solve it, and we did. Actually, the number of poisoning in the restaurant, the drop was like of 200%. Instead of 25 per year, we have now about 8 per year. And we have less controls, less fines, less instructions, less everything what is oppressive, and we have better result. In the city, it's something similar at the same time because the city is a very complex system. It's a system of systems. Many systems do operate in the city, and in order of the city to be successful, you have to have certain prerequisites in the city. And again, like very fluent, very operational transport system, very good public spaces, good educational system, everything. But again, speaking about the most successful cities, they have to have 3 features. They have to be smart, they have to be open, and they have to be fast. If making into order from the most important to the less important, I think open is the most important, fast is the second on the second place, and the smart is on the 3rd place. Because if you are open, the smartness gets immediately, even without your attempts. And that's exactly the policies I pursue here in Vilnius, and in those areas where these policies are implemented in the most radical way, these bring results. And of course, I'm ready to tell about this.
Well, building on that, since our section is around smart cities, what does that mean for you? A lot of the rhetoric around smart cities is that, it's just the use of kind of big data or how technology can be used as a catalyst to improve public policy, but isn't it also about kind of empowering citizens themselves, or what does it mean for you?
Yeah, again, the word smart already became a word when everybody uses this word, and the definition of smart is very vague. So when defining the smart, this open and fast, it's in the definition for me. So first of all, I think in order to be smart, you don't necessarily have to have very smart tools. When very often when you look at the service of smart cities, you immediately rush to the smart tools. This city implemented just this kind of platform, or this kind of program, or this kind of whatever. But I think, first of all, you have to make smart decisions. And in order to make smart decisions, you have to analyze data. You have to have a capability of analyzing data. You have to have capability of making decisions based on data. So I think this is the first instance. Just not being stupid is the definition of smart. And stupid is making wrong decisions. So making right decisions is smart. If you need tools to be smart, then tools come as a second place. But with the tools, I think it's very important again to have this concept of openness, first of all, because it works. It comes together, openness and smartness. Because if the city doesn't open its own data, it's not necessarily big data, but data in general. I think many leaders, including mayors, do afraid to open data because they think that then citizens will understand something what is wrong in their city. And of course, it's a little bit dangerous because they will start asking you to fix it, and sometimes you're not able to do it in a couple of months. And they I think very wrongly think that they will hide this data from citizens. In fact, what happens when you do not open the data, it means that your medium level servants, public servants, are hiding data from you. Because if you open data, this data becomes obvious for you as well. And just to give maybe iconic example, with one of the first examples when we started this very radical open data policy, because I think it's the most radical open data policy in the whole Europe. I mean, no excuse policy. All data is open when somebody requires it, and we are opening it proactively. One of these iconic examples is this, again, this not so original, this tracking system of snow machines during winter time, when you see where those are coming. So the first day when this instrument was implemented, the first day when people came to me and said, just take a look, so how it works. The first day, the question raises, what does this car does in the other city? And actually not in the other city, but in the forest somewhere. And actually they were misusing the public property in the most brutal way. This immediately led to some decisions about the head of the company. And what's the most important thing, in the coming 5 or 3 even months, some very important decisions were made concerning the algorithms, how the city does operate, because before it was impossible to see those mistakes which were done. Just suddenly when you see it open, when people may comment, immediately you're making a decision which may allow to save you 10 or 20% of all costs, and actually to redirect it to the most urgent needs. So this is maybe one of the first examples, one of the radical ones. So openness is the very important thing, and being fast as well. Because being smart doesn't mean that mayor's office is smart. When the city is smart, then it's okay. And for example, day before yesterday, we just launched the first platform of that kind, of so radical kind of planning your transportation habits and routes, where you have everything integrated. You have pedestrian, bicycle renting, car sharing, car renting, taxi, Uber, public transport. You may pay all the bill for all of this with this tool. And this tool is private. It's done by Lithuanian startup Trafi. And the reason why they've started it in Vilnius but not in other cities, because we have rather radical open data policy. And they see that companies which do not open their data in other cities, they do open it in Vilnius because we are opening this data. And suddenly we have a very smart tool, not investing in it at all, because we are just open.
Mm-hmm. So in a sense, you're providing kind of the enabling environment for those actors to come in, to play, and to create these kind of pilot projects, which is also another way that is very important, an effective way to really understand, the impact of potential policies that we'll have. So it's great to kind of have this opportunity to play around with the pilot project to begin with and see whether it's deemed usable.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that sometimes it's very important to open data and to be very open and to be very fast to new trends, even in those cases when you do not know where it will lead. Yeah. Because if you know where it will lead, it's very easy to be open and to be quick and to say, okay, I have this, I make this step and this will lead to this and that. Sometimes when you open up this and you allow things to happen in your city, you do not know where it will end up, but it's ending up in a very good results. Sometimes you know. For example, again, I'm quite proud of having again another very illustrative example. I'm so surprised when so many cities are fighting Airbnb or Uber or some other new trends. Well, we have very deliberate policy of being like faster than other cities and more open than other cities. So speaking about Uber, I'm very proud again that out of 700 cities where Uber is operating, and more or less the same number of cities were kicked out, and of course they don't have this exact data, but out of these 1,500 cities, guess what city was the quickest one in accepting this tool. I mean, from the first visit of their responsible people to open these operations, it took less than 4 weeks for them to start operations here in Vilnius, and it's twice as fast as the second fastest city. And this is our deliberate efforts to be fast in all these areas. In some cases it's more difficult than in this one, but I think it has to be very clear that city has to be open. Cities became cities because they were open to many things, to different cultures, to different activities. If they stop being open, they are not cities anymore. And mentality, as you mentioned, becomes a little bit similar to rural mentality, which makes your city not city anymore. So I think this is the definition of the city in general.
Well, you mentioned, the need to act fast. Is there a danger of doing it too fast, almost? Kind of opening it up to all of those partners, having a lot of open data, obviously everything being open, but doesn't it kind of lead down certain alleys where we still haven't explored in terms of data privacy or how the data can be used and misused as well?
Theoretically, it's a possibility to have some problems and mistakes being made. Practically, I never experienced that. So theoretically, it is a problem. Practically, not. Especially when speaking about government, because government typically is quite slow to make decisions. And again, I think experimenting in government is a little bit more maybe dangerous thing, but allowing business to experiment in your city, that's a different thing. And I think, again, allowing to experiment in your city is a very, very important issue.
Yeah, I mean, I would add that, of course, innovation happens that way. I agree, but I think as long as we don't allow any one kind of company or member of the private sector to have a monopoly on the data and kind of still be able to regulate it in some ways, I think technology is moving way faster than we can possibly kind of catch up and regulate it as well. So there's always a bit of a danger of catching up with some of those developments. But I wanted to ask you more to give you more examples if possible. So you mentioned, some of the ways how data can be used to make the city more effective and more efficient, kind of improving services. What is the role of the private sector as well, again, as a kind of a partner with the data that is available to make other improvements in terms of, what are some of the challenges that you've addressed beyond kind of making the city efficient?
That's a very important question. I think that, in private business, I've also seen both approaches. Some people are trying to be so unique that they do not show anything they create to other people, and they want to create a unique product, and what happens immediately, they become slower than others because they are isolated from other people and they are quite slow. Some other businesses immediately become more open, and of course they are open to stealing of those ideas to be stolen, but of course they get very quick feedback, and some of these ideas are being killed at very easy stage, and they may focus on other ideas. And I see that the second approach is much more efficient, especially nowadays. In this city, one of our four main competitive advantages, or the areas where we are fastest in this future economic sectors, is fintech industry. Nobody would predict that 15 years ago, but 10 years ago it was already something visible. 5 years ago it was already strong, and today it's very strong. And when I remember those talks in the media or among even economists that these shared service centers or competence centers, they move here one day and they will leave other day, and it's so quick to leave. But when we see what happens in banking sector, for example, it's a huge loss of jobs in this sector, but jobs are lost not in shared service centers or in competence centers, but on this service points, completely in different area. I mean, shared service centers become even stronger. And of course, there's a huge possibility of job destruction and creative destruction in general in this financial sector. But if there will be no stone left on the stone in financial sector, like in 5 years or 10 years in financial sector as we know it, so something will remain. So what will remain? Of course, some other tools for people to interact with each other, and of course, where it will be, all these new tendencies, new firms, of course, in those cases where the smartest people gather together to find these destructive tools. And immediately what we have here in Vilnius, it's not only the big corporations and the branches of big corporations of financial sector, but also smartest startups in this area. And when we see that whatever new technologies are being invented, many of them are being invented here in Vilnius, which is the only hope that if like the sector will lose 90% of all jobs, maybe half of this remaining 10% will be here in this place where this creative destruction just happened. And companies, of course, who do invest themselves in destructing their way of like doing business, of course they have bigger chance of survive if everything will collapse or will be different.
So what are two of the biggest challenges that Vilnius is facing? Again, could be related to kind of the smart city stream. Who are your partners, and why do you feel that those opportunities are creating kind of more economic opportunities? You talk about the loss of jobs, and how is that kind of changing that environment?
I think that all comes together, and you know, what struck me when I became a mayor 2 and a bit years ago, I had some impression of what shall I do as a mayor for Vilnius, but then I invited representatives of big corporations, people working like white-collar jobs, shared service centers and others, asking what shall I do as a mayor for you to be even more comfortable here in Vilnius. So they told something about international aspects, something about being like friendly to everyone. But there are 3 main things which were also visible here in your presentation. First request was, please do have better education and more kindergartens. That was the issue. Then was better public transport. And then was better public spaces. And you know that when you look from outside, you don't typically expect that from business. That's typically what you expect from citizens. And in fact, I think it's a reflection of new framework of how business does operate, because it was a framework, like again, 30 years ago, when investment or money was the most important thing, and of course, you were doing everything to get finances to your country. Nowadays, it's very clear that the first question I do get from all potential investors when I do meet them, and do meet quite many of them, and many fortunately making this decision to come to Vilnius, the first question or the first worry is, do you have enough talent here in Vilnius? And speaking about talent is both about talented people who are raised here and who want to stay here in Vilnius, and also about people who would like to come to Vilnius. And actually the competition for talent is, I think, the biggest competition in the city. So that's the answer why education is the most important thing. I think transportation is the second most important thing, because when looking to young talents, we have to understand that the habits are completely different than of those people who are of my age or older. Because the main reason why when you are 22, let's say today, you do not drive your own car is exactly the same reason why I was driving my own car. I was driving my own car because I didn't have time, so I have to drive my car. But people nowadays, they do not have time. That's the reason why they do not drive their own car. They want to look to internet, to smartphones, and so on. And so public transport is a very important thing. And again, public space is the comfort in the city when you go outside of the building. So how do you feel? So these are the 3 things that's most important in competing for talent. And these are the main challenges for me. I'm very happy about having very good results in terms of kindergarten and education. There are very many things to achieve yet. Public transport is again still an issue, but we're working on it very extensively. And public spaces, again, we have a green city, but we have to invest even more in this.
Yep, that's always an important one. But yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned in your experience as well, kind of the alignment of priorities for the businesses as well as the public sector. But how do you ensure buy-in and public support for the projects that are being undertaken in the city?
Out of these things, this education, public transport, and like public open spaces, it's okay for business and for general public. That's not a problem. we have to be open that open data is a concept which is completely not understandable for general public. I mean, open data, so what? Open data means nothing to majority of citizens, and I do understand that it's not a thing you want to sell. You want to sell very practical products of actually solving the issues, and actually when you use open data to solve certain issues, so that's what people are acknowledging as an important things. And sometimes it's even very easy thing, on very practical thing. It's not necessarily something very sophisticated. For example, in Vilnius we have around, I think, 1,000 kilometers of new pavements to be paved for pedestrian work. Around 1,000. It's very clear, that it will not be done in 1 year. It's very clear that it will not be done even in 4 years. So the question is where you start, in what location? Because typically, when being a mayor, it's especially of such a city which is not a mega city like Vilnius, it's quite easy to get into this trap that if someone is requesting or if is collecting 500 signatures, to start investing immediately into that place. But collecting data about where it is the most important thing and where is the less important thing, I think it's very important. And again, I do exactly know that this bus station here by the train station is the second busy station in Vilnius. I know where the most busy station, I know where the third most busy station, and of course when speaking about investment, about pavement, about everything, I do know where to invest. And this is data, and this is openness, because people may argue about this, and it allows me to make smarter decisions even with limited funds, and it allows to achieve better results. So this is quite a long story, but open data is the only thing which people that don't understand.
Well, we can hope that all of that data that is available will help us solve certain problems, like the one that was discussed here about not building crosswalks for the railway station actually in time, or just not having that long-term vision of how people are going to get to the rail station. But I wanted to actually open it up to the floor to see if we have any questions before I move on with a slightly different topic. Are there any questions for myself or Mr. Šimašius? Okay, maybe towards the end. That's fine. I did want to ask about kind of your relationship with the national government. Obviously, you're coming from the ministry as well, but as a mayor and local municipalities as a whole, the relationship with the national government. So I learned about the Lithuanian urban agenda today, and what would that mean for Vilnius, and what is kind of the overall relationship between municipalities in terms of funding and in terms of kind of the challenges that you're facing as well?
The main challenge is, I will be very open, that there is a general perception in the country that being a capital city immediately means being somehow privileged, and it means that you have a good position in general, so we don't need to invest into capital city. We do need to invest in some small towns in order to keep people living in those small towns, which actually means that you are investing in those places where people do not want to live, instead of investing in those places where people tend to like to live and tend to live. So that's the issue which is very common in many countries. And even in Lithuania, when you again showed this chart about the share of capital city population in relation to the general population of the country, and in Vilnius we have this quite a small share, especially for the country of such size. Of course, for bigger countries, sometimes the share is even smaller, like Berlin, for example. It's very small share for the Germany, but in small countries, it's typically the share is more than half in capital city. So even in the case when less than a third of the population lives in capital city, we still have this challenge of political perception that we have to invest everywhere else, but not in the capital city. So that is the biggest problem. On the other hand, I must say that again, I do subscribe to it 100%, that cities are becoming more and more important, while governments or national governments are becoming less and less important worldwide. Because cities do have very direct impact on those factors which influence your decision to live or not to live in this particular place, to invest or not invest in this particular place, while on national level, typically, if something is really important, you actually do adjust, but it's not, typically not so important. So I think that again, being mayor of the city, you don't have the right to blame on the government if something is wrong in your city. There are plenty of tools to make smart decisions on every city, and actually I think this is the only attitude. So the only blame, I would say, that give me more powers, give me power, be responsible of every territory in Vilnius instead of having some reservates where a government is playing their games, even though every citizen thinks that it's a municipal decision. So that's the only thing, nothing more.
Well, that's a very kind of positive spin in the relationship with the national government than we usually get. But yes, cities are definitely generally more dynamic and have the options to attract funds on their own as well. So can you give an example of attracting kind of a private sector funder or partner for a particular project here?
So typically, these are projects related to the areas which are the most competitive in our case. Speaking about economics, it's about future economics, it's fintech industry, it's IT and also gaming industry, it's also laser and optical industry and biotech industry. In all cases, there are very concrete, very practical aspects, what has to be solved in order for those investments to be made. And again, the most important is, again, it's not even the road, not the pavement, not the public transport, but the talented people. And yes, so we've had many investment. I'm especially proud of this sometimes small investment when, for example, companies who do decide to come to European market from either America or China, and they do decide to come through Vilnius and to test new ideas. And with such projects as this same traffic I used just a couple of minutes ago about this projects started in Vilnius because they do go worldwide. I mean, they are most influential players in Brazil or Indonesia, but they do test the new technologies here in Vilnius because it's better environment, because of this open data environment, because it enables them to test new things, and then they are able to go elsewhere and say, it works. Let's implement in the other city.
Well, to sum up, would it be fair an assessment to summarize your vision for Vilnius as an open, smart, and a fast city? Do you have any other thoughts to add for your vision for Vilnius before we close?
I think it's very clear that speaking about the vision of Vilnius, it has to remain on this, and we have to be very focused on, again, being smart. It's people who have to be smart. I think sometimes it begins with the very small things, and just this September we started one very good initiative, I think, which will be developed, and I think will be even more important for the future of Vilnius or Lithuania than many other big projects. Every fifth year secondary school student got a microcomputer from municipality in general, but with the support of private sector, because it's not a microcomputer, which actually costs $12. It's almost nothing, actually. On the market it costs like almost $30, but of course we've got a discount for such amount. But when we speak about what will happen in 20 years, of course we do understand that we will need qualifications which we do not recognize today. But definitely what will be needed, we will need creative people who will be brave to create instead of using technology, which are getting more and more to get used to use technology. Those people will be flourishing who will be able to create technology. And in order to create, you have to have the skills to create. And in order to have skills, you have to have tools. So this like $12 microcomputer, which is impossible to play game on this computer without creating the game first, I think is the most important thing, because those people will understand, those who will use it, that I've started it, I programmed my name or compass or thermometer or something else, but this is what will remain in their heads, that I am able to use technology to create something new. So when speaking about one thing, which is the most important, I would pick up this very tiny and small thing. And I think in 20 years, we will have people who will be enablers of new technologies, new things, because they've got this computer today.
Okay, well, that's a ripple effect right there. So thank you very much. We can all hope that this is going to continue to inspire, the future leaders of Vilnius as well. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.